Okay, so it's 11:01, so we can get started. So welcome, this is the StockTrak New Features webinar for fall 2022. This is scheduled for a half an hour, and I have no intention to keep anyone late. This webinar is also going to be recorded and available for later, so if you have to drop off for any reason, we will have it available for all professors and send it out in an email later this week or next week. So high level, when we cover, we have a lot of new stuff this summer. The biggest update to our site that we've been working on for most of the last year actually is what we're going to call StockTrak 6. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. It's a major overhaul to the look and feel of the site. We're not actually changing where things are, but in terms of mobile compatibility and making sure it scales properly to screen sizes and just generally looking a little bit more 2022 is the goal of that one. We're also releasing a new mobile app dedicated for mobile devices. New methods for professors to reach their students directly in StockTrak, and for students to get notifications about their portfolio in case they don't log in regularly. We have new reports for the class assignments, brand new option spreads trading pit coming soon. Forex is now using real-time prices, both display and in the back end. And if you are using any of our personal finance resources, we have a couple of improvements for a budgeting game as well. So let me dive into these one by one. First one is a StockTrak 6. Now, StockTrak 6 is a update to the look and feel of our website. The first thing that you might notice if you were to opt into our beta over the last 4 months is that the StockTrak 6 takes up the whole width of the screen. What that actually means is that if a student is using a mobile device, for example, the screen scales and everything looks a lot better. The former version of StockTrak has a mobile version where it's basically a stripped down version of the desktop version that students can access on their mobile device that they get directed to automatically instead of the website. We're retiring that and we're using just this new version. That way the students have the exact same tools, the exact same features between desktop and mobile. In terms of where you find all your stuff, the main menu itself is a little bit rearranged. We've kind of folded a lot of the portfolio stuff into one of these what we call mega menus, so there's more stuff visible at a time. That's just so we can get a little rid of some of the clutter that has been taking up a lot of space here in the past, especially as we've been adding new features, keeping a little bit better organized. So the research tools are broken out a little bit better. Our learning library for students is a little bit more easy to find. And your admin tools, we've actually broken up to make it a lot easier to find the stuff that you need. So there's one section for admin where you can create your class, edit settings, things like that. But most of the time what professors really need is the reports. So we made it a lot easier to actually get to these reports instead of having to navigate through 4 or 5 different menus. If you want to try out our beta version right away, you can access it by going to, under the dashboard, you're going to edit profile. And there's actually an option to opt into the beta. We've been testing this over the last about 4 months. We actually started inviting students to test out the beta version last April. Towards the end of last April, May, all the summer classes have had the opportunity to try it out. We've been gathering feedback and making sure that it's going to be perfect when we actually launch it in about 3 weeks. Not every page is using the StockTrak 6 layout quite yet. For example, your class creation page, the student registration pages, we haven't changed those at all. Those will be changing some point later in the fall once we've got a little bit more testing under our belt so we can make sure that your classes can get started without a hitch. Next up is the StockTrak Mobile App. So this actually is finally launching today. This app has been in development for about 18 months. It's a native app for mobile devices. It's being released for both Android and iPhone, giving your students basically everything they use on the regular desktop version on an app. Now, you might have just heard me say that the StockTrak 6 desktop version is completely mobile optimized, and that's true, but sometimes students just prefer having it in an app. Where they have things a little bit like dedicated for mobile, and it runs a little bit more efficiently than the website does, a little bit less data transfer, things like that. So this actually launches today. We have again been testing this for the last several months, and we're going to be letting students know this is available through some of our on-site messaging, some of our emails. When students register for the first time, they'll be invited to access this. Some things that you will not find in the mobile app are your professor admin tools are not on the app. It's really for the students, for them to manage their portfolio. If you are using our personal finance resources, the budgeting game also is not yet on the mobile app. It is on the mobile version of the website though, and basically the app currently is restricted to just the investing simulation, all the research tools, and all the portfolio tools. But otherwise, it's all there, and we are really excited to get that out, and we're looking forward to the student feedback we're going to see out for the rest of the year. New messaging center. I just mentioned that we're going to be messaging some students about how to get that mobile app, and one of the ways to do that is the new messaging center. We actually launched this in the middle of the spring semester, but most professors and most students weren't really aware of it. Right at the top of the page, you might notice that there's this kind of icon about messages, and there might be a notification here. This notification, if you click on that, it takes you to the messaging center. The messaging center is a place where students are going to get alerts about their, in particular, their stock portfolio, but also if there's any support issues that come up, they're also going to get notified here in addition to the regular support ticket system and emails. For example, if students receive dividends on their portfolio, we used to just show a message on their open positions for a week. Or same thing with the splits. Students may or may not have noticed that it might miss it, and we actually get quite a lot of questions from students asking, did we actually put it in their portfolio, that kind of thing. But now the messaging center is going to have those automatically. Anytime there's some of those kinds of changes that apply to their portfolio, they'll be able to see them here. Students can click the messages to read them. They can say remind me later. They can just delete them and get rid of it entirely. And as they read the messages, they disappear from the alerts. Now, you as the professor can also send messages to your students through the messaging center. If you go to your registration file report, there is a button to message each student here. There's also an option on your dashboard to send a blast message to everybody who's in one particular class. Students cannot send messages through the messaging center at this time. We do plan on letting them submit support tickets at some point in the fall through the messaging system, but they will not be able to message other students, and they will not be able to reach you through the messaging center. They can continue using your email and whatever LMS system your school uses, just to make sure that professors don't have some other method of communication they need to keep track of all the time. The messaging center for professors is more applicable for professors who are using this as kind of a either departmental challenge, or maybe it's something that's for a club or something rather than a regular class, just because most of the time it's more consistent to keep the messaging with the regular channels you use for your class for other things. But in terms of making sure the students keep up to date with what's going on in their account on our end, it's a great way so they know exactly what's happened since the last time they looked. Speaking of class reports, we have new class assignment reports. So if you've used our assignment system in the past, this is a place where you can assign, not just asking your students to make certain types of trades, for example, telling them they need to make their first 15 trades by the end of week 3 of class. That's a very common one. But you can also assign articles, lessons, and tutorials. So one of the questions that we've gotten from professors, especially at some of the more introductory level classes, they wanted to be able to see what students have actually done for the quizzes that are involved in some of those lessons. So for example, in this article I have here, there's I assigned what is a stock article, what is a ticker symbol, so the basics of the basics. This would be for like a very, very junior level class. This is the old type of reports where you can basically see the student did this task. And if I go over here, I can see this is the grade they got on the 2 lessons here. But I can't actually see, what did they answer on those quizzes, and I can't see things like, at the class as a whole, what did they get right and wrong. So the new versions of these pages actually include all of that information. So you'll be able to see each student, how long they've taken to complete the stuff they've done so far in this assignment. When you go to create an assignment, it'll also give you an estimate of how much time you're actually asking students to put into it. So you don't mistakenly just ask them to do 15 hours of work in a 2-week assignment. The details will show you for every article or lesson they did, how long they took to do it, what grade they got on it, and if you can go even deeper in the details of what exact questions they answered right and wrong. If you allow students to retake their quizzes, you can even see the different attempts they've taken. There's also class summary reports. The class summary report will give you the same information for each of the lessons that you've assigned to your students by the task itself. So I don't have much data loading here right now because I haven't really done anything in this test class, but basically it should look like your, if you look at your edit assignment page, you'll have a button next to each task to see how many, to actually see the class summary for that. What's the average time your class has taken to complete that task? What's the average grade the class got? It'll let you dive in to look at the actual questions of what did they get right and wrong on each of the, or how many students got each question right and wrong. What was the percentage for that? So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, that's really applicable. For most professors teaching an investments class, they usually don't rely too heavily on our investing lessons because they're pretty lightweight, except for some introductory classes. But if you're looking at more like a personal finance or wealth management class where the students start at kind of a more junior level, especially the personal finance classes where we have a lot more personal finance lessons built in here, that will be a lot better than our old reporting to help you get a sense of where your class is for each of the items that you've assigned so far. I want to pause for a second. Do I have any questions about the stuff I've covered so far? Because I have been going pretty quickly. Okay, not yet. I'll check again towards the end as well. Next up, option spreads. So the old system of StockTrak supported a couple types of option spreads, protective puts and things like that, but not the entire width and breadth of what you can do with options. Especially we had no support for like multi-legged options. Now we do. The new option spreads for StockTrak is coming out in about 3 weeks is the current target. Sorry. The option spreads has an entirely new trading pit. The new trading pit for option spreads has, it basically helps students understand what they're trying to do with each type of spread. There's a description of what the spread they selected actually does and how it's supposed to work and where the profit is supposed to be. Oh, I have assignments already set for this semester. Once this new version goes live, will my assignments carry over? Yes, they will. All the data is already being collected. It's just we're not showing it on the old reports pages. They will be available on the new reports page when you have it. For the option spreads, though, you can say we're not quite finished with this yet, which is why it's not live. But for each of the types of option spreads that we now support, and I think there's about 22 of them, it'll give the description of what this spread is. There'll be a profit diagram showing the students, where would the profit be for this transaction, of where do you think the price of the underlying stock is going. We help them by kind of pre-filling some of the types of legs that are as part of this spread, where they say how many actually positions of the spread do you want, and then it kind of helps them out by pre-setting some of this stuff, and they really just need to select the strike prices. This is also a huge enhancement to the way we're calculating margins for option spreads. Like I said before, we were only really supporting a few select types in the past, and we were hard coding the margin requirements for each of those when the students were placing it. This is far more dynamic, where even if a student were to go into the regular options pit and place each of these legs one by one, the margins will still be calculated properly. This hasn't really been a huge issue in the past, but we know that more and more derivatives classes are relying on talking about spreads recently. And beyond that, a lot of just students who know what options and option spreads are really want to leverage this. And so we're making sure we take advantage of that going forward. Also new is Forex Trading. So we've had Forex Trading as part of StockTrak for quite a number of years already. The changes to Forex, really, if you were to look at the trading pit, you're not going to notice a big difference. But in semesters past, just like our other security types, Forex traded in the back end using the real-time bid-ask prices, but students were only able to see 15-minute delayed prices on the site. We have a new agreement with our data vendors for Forex prices, and now students can also see the real-time prices for Forex, both when trading in the open positions. So it's one of those where the to the second really does count, and so we were able to secure that to make the life of the classes that use Forex a little bit easier. Last up is our enhancements to our budgeting game. So if you have not used StockTrak's budgeting game in the past, basically the idea is that for personal finance classes, in addition to the investment simulation, where most personal finance classes aren't going to get into options and derivatives, but they are going to be spending quite a lot of time on cash management and budgeting. Our budgeting game is specifically for those classes. Let me see if I can find my budget game. Yep. So the budgeting game on StockTrak is a cash management simulation where students have a part-time job or a full-time job, depending on the settings the professor has, and they move forward through a simulated year to manage their cash and budget over time. There's events that happen throughout the game that make it a little bit more difficult. They have lots of choices where they're kind of trying to balance setting savings goals, building their quality of life, having managing their credit score, and all that gets aggregated into overall game scores that are used for class rankings. So just like StockTrak has class rankings based on portfolio value, the budget game has class rankings based on those other metrics: their net worth, their credit score, their quality of life, and an aggregate score of the three. The biggest changes that we made to the budget game, if you haven't seen it before, are that we're changing basically how bills are issued to students. We're giving students longer time to pay the bills, and we're giving them more bills earlier in the month. But we're also changing some of the metrics for the quality of life score. Historically, when a student goes to play the game, random events pop up throughout, which kind of attempt to break their budget. And depending on how they decide to make their spending choices on those decisions is a big factor in their quality of life. The downside to that is that students couldn't buy stuff unless a random event came up, and students would tend to forget what exactly they spent their money on because it was just an event that came up and then went away. The new version of this actually uses what's called an apartment, where the students will have a screen they can go to actually see the stuff that they've been purchasing and using throughout the budget game, and how that's actually impacted them over time. So if they have a cheaper apartment, it's going to look smaller and shabbier than if they had an expensive luxury apartment. If they bought a new couch, they can see that new couch. And they will also have the opportunity from that apartment to buy things outside this. Oh, my tournament will begin on Monday, August 15th. Do both I and students need to opt into beta test for version 6 to start the semester? You do not. You will have the new version as soon as it releases. The new version carries over completely with the old version. There's 100% backwards compatibility, so anything your students are doing in the old version will carry straight over. Honestly, when we were doing our beta testing, not every student even realized they were using the new version unless we kind of pointed out some of the layout changes, because most of the stuff they use is in the same place. It's really a quality of life thing when it comes to making sure that they're able to see it on mobile devices, scales better with screens, that kind of stuff. So for the budgeting game, the biggest change that we have here is the apartment. The budgeting game itself currently can only be played on a desktop device, and also with this update that we're releasing in a couple of weeks here, it will be compatible with mobile devices as well. Again, not on the app, but if the students come here on their phones, they will be able to use it. If you are interested in learning more about the budgeting game, if you have a personal finance class that you're teaching, or if you know another professor who is at your school, we'd be happy to set up a dedicated demo to go through this in more detail. I think most of the professors on here focus on derivatives and stuff, so this might not be too applicable to your classes. So on our end, that's all the big stuff. Like I said, the StockTrak 6 update is actually the biggest one that we've released in several years. And really the enhancements of that is going to allow us to do a lot more interesting stuff in the future. Particularly if your school is interested in our white labeled version, or if you have a site license, there's a lot of features in StockTrak 6 that's going to open up a lot of doors for those kinds of schools. For schools that are just using us per account, it makes it a lot easier for students to access the site and their portfolio and manage everything on it from their mobile device. Is the pricing the same? We did do a very slight increase to our prices. I think most of the service levels went up by $1 or $2 this semester, but it has nothing to do with the StockTrak 6. It's just general rising costs we've seen across the economy, unfortunately. It's the first time we've risen prices in several years, and we don't intend to do it again anytime soon. If your school uses a site license, though, the prices for that have not changed. I'm glad to hear it. So just for that's the record, I've used StockTrak in my finance courses for several years. Great product. Thanks so much. And that's exactly what I like to hear. When did the prices get adjusted on the site? I think it was about a month ago. It was towards the middle of the summer, kind of at the dead period of the year. I was leaving it open for any additional questions, but it looks like I actually wrapped up early. I tend to talk a little bit fast when presenting. The expirations for futures is confusing. Can you discuss the best way for students to be alerted to expiry? That is actually one of the things that we intend to be doing with our messaging center, is letting students know when the options expire. In general, though, when a student goes to trade in a future, let me go to my other portfolio here. They should be picking the expiration date when trading. In this last semester, one of the issues was that we noticed that some of the futures were not expiring when they should have been, and so they're carrying into the student's portfolio, and the students had to let us know to trade it off. We actually, when it expires, their profit or loss has futures. That was an issue on our end. That was a back-end issue. We had some futures this last semester. We actually rewrote the way that futures expire in our back end to properly close them out when the future is set to expire. Our support team also did a full audit of all the futures this over the summer to make sure the expirations were correct. That was one of the issues that we had, was that the expiration dates of some of the futures from like CME actually changed by a few days or a week over the last year, and we had not updated our system to reflect that. It is reflected in our system now. A ready presentation for illustration for students. Do you mean to introduce StockTrak as in general, or for a particular piece of it? So in general, I don't have a good one for students in general, but what we do have, and this is what the vast majority of professors actually use for getting students onboarded, is when you go to create your class, you have the option to create a new assignment. And the most important parts of these is there's several videos in here. Managing a portfolio, trading stocks. Down here we have, there's basically a tutorial video for every part of the site. And those are the ones that actually walk through students how to do this. This managing your portfolio one is probably the most important one. This is the one that kind of does the general where you are. Trading stocks, trading mutual funds, trading bonds, trading options, trading futures. There's videos for each of those, and there's also a lengthy video on using our research and quotes tool to actually do their investing research. So videos for order terms, trailing stop orders, limit sell, how all of those different types of order types work. So my recommendation is do use the assignments, especially the stuff that's in the first section here, in this second section here. A lot of this is going to be reviewed for students, especially in the higher level finance classes, but some of it's not, and just making sure the students are aware these tutorials exist is actually going to save quite a bit of class time. It also encourages students to reach out to our support team when they have questions with our live chat. We can take the PowerPoint presentations we've done to build these videos and make these available to professors if you really want to go over it in class. But this is actually the first time a professor's asked us for it. Any change on how to register a class? There is no change on how to register a class at this time. Like I mentioned, when we do with the StockTrak 6 update, we will eventually be updating the class creation process. The biggest change in there is that when you go to create a class, you'll be able to skip most of the settings, use the defaults if you want to, or copy a previous class instead of kind of going through every single thing one by one. But that will not be released until probably late October, so it does not impact any of the classes being set up for this spring, or for this fall, sorry. Okay, if there's no other questions, we can adjourn for the day. If you do have any questions, there's a few different ways you can reach out. The first is if you contact me. My name is Kevin Smith. ksmith@stocktrak.com is my direct email. You can also schedule a walkthrough or a demo. You just email sales@stocktrak.com, and our account managers or sales team will reach out and walk everything through with you, particularly if you have any questions about the budgeting game or our personal finance features. And of course, anytime during market hours, our live chat is available to our support team. They're really great at what they do, and they can basically walk you through anything you need to accomplish on our sites. So with that in mind, thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your days.